was appointed Chief Executive of the Society for Mucopolysaccharide and Related Diseases in 1993. During her time at the MPS Society, she has taken the charity to new heights, managing a substantial research budget and a UK-wide advocacy service, providing needs-led support to nearly 1,300 children and adult sufferers, their families and professionals in the area of home adaptations, special educational needs, access to new therapies, respite care, palliative care, and pre- and post-bereavement support. Christine has served on the Department of Health Advisory Board on genetic testing and is currently a patient representative on the NHS England LDS Specialised Commissioning Advocacy Advisory Group. Christine was awarded Member of the British Empire for her services to metabolic diseases by the Queen in the New Year's Honours List for 2002, and at the 2006 International Symposium on Mucopolysaccharide and Related Diseases received a Lifetime Award from the international MPS community. Christine continues to promote the needs of MPS, Fabry and lysosomal storage disorders across nations and working closely with the MPS International Network. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you very much, Flora, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you today. It's always a pleasure to work with emerging groups and younger groups, because once we were in exactly the same position as you. And I hope out of today we can perhaps inspire you to see that although it's a hard path, that you can achieve the most incredible successes. So just a little bit to say that the MPS Society was founded in 1982. I did actually start it, but I was also involved in rare diseases. I was National Development Officer for Rare Diseases at Contact a Family from 1983 until 1993, and actually worked in supporting more than 300 patient organisations to start. So I've never lost that passion beyond MPS, although I like to use the example. And when we started, it was around the kitchen table. It was an idea. It was looking for other people in the same situation as yourself. My son did have an MPS disorder, Hunter's disease, and we came back from a diplomatic posting in Tokyo, and I thought maybe it was time, he was 5, to find somebody else to talk to. And unfortunately, in the time that it took us to write the letters to MenCap, and there was no social media, so it was a really hard drafting of letters, Simon died. But by that time, we had 40 families contact us and say that they had a child with the same disease. More startling, but forgivable now, is that the clinician that we were under was the same one, and she told us the same story, that she didn't know anyone else. Hopefully things have changed for most of us over the last 35 years. So I do understand where many of you have started out and where you've come from. So we set out to gain local support, fundraising, awareness, and we received some support from some one or two expert clinicians, and we registered as a charity. And everything was homegrown. Everybody was a volunteer. Today, the MPS Society is 33 years old, and it has, as you would expect, clear aims and objectives, and its well-developed policies and procedures. And it works in partnership with professionals and with all the specialist centres in England and the UK. And perhaps one of our proudest developments that started at a very early stage was to identify a clinician that had a passion for our diseases. And he was Professor Ed now, is Professor Ed Reid. Sadly he died not so long ago, still quite a young man, but he travelled the world with me in those first 20 years, promoting mucopolysaccharide diseases, sharing his experiences, working on the preclinical research to hopefully bring to fruition treatments for And that was very important. You've got to get someone on board that has a passion and is going to work tirelessly with you. And over time, we've become a limited company and a registered charity in England and Scotland. And we run clinical trial patient access programs through our trading subsidiary company, and I'll say a little bit more about that later. We have a professional relationship with industry. We're not afraid to work with industry, not afraid to challenge industry. And I think because we are regarded as a very professional organisation, that all of you are and can become, that you can have that relationship. It's a business, ultimately, that you are doing, but it's a philanthropic business. And we provide and challenge, we provide feedback to NHS England, politicians and government, and never more so than has been in the last 2 months and ongoing. I was only at Downing Street with some of our members the day before yesterday. So this is our building. Again, we started at the kitchen table. We haven't had any great legacies, no great money. It's been hard earned by our members to give us the stability in which to work. So I just want to. I've always felt, right from day one, when you start a patient organisation, that if you give, you'll get. And so being able to provide that support to a cut above anything else, a cut above what social services, health, others can do, because you've got the specialist knowledge and the empathy that others may not have, is really important, because that engages with the people who are affected with the diseases, their families, their relations, their friends, and indeed the professional people involved in the care of that young person. And so from a very early stage, it started out in a voluntary capacity and then became untenable because of things like health and safety, risk management. We provide an advocacy service. Today it's run by a senior social worker based in the Amersham office, but they cover the whole of the United Kingdom, from the north of Scotland to Northern Ireland, Wales, and the whole of England. We have put our Northern Ireland worker in Belfast for logistical reasons, but in terms of working together as a team, the scope to learn, training, we've actually always found it better to keep the team together in one place and let them travel than to try and put people in different parts working alone, and the risks that there can be to that. So we do provide an individual advocacy service which covers all areas of social services, access to treatments, access to clinical trials, disability benefits. And that is our bread and butter work. That's what engages with our members. That's what makes their life a little bit more bearable on a day-to-day basis. We support people, families through transition from paediatric to clinical care. And indeed, we've worked with the clinical centres and with the LSD collaborative, which I'll come to, which is working more collaboratively outside of MPS, to develop a patient pathway, which was funded by the Department of Health. We, as I've said, the advocacy service is the backbone of the society. From the moment the child or the adult is diagnosed, the family is supported, if they wish, the family is supported throughout the MPS journey. And many of our bereaved families are still with us 25 years on. We started out as a children's charity, and an adult was an absolute rare breed. Today, 70% of our membership is over 18 years of age, and you need to bear that in mind, because a lot of our members are only alive today because of the new treatments that have emerged since the early 2000s. And so we had to evolve and to have a vision and to keep an open mind to make sure we involved our young MPS and Fabry adults, and not only to empower them, but to bring fresh impetus to the MPS Society. We held young adult weekends, and probably one of the most successful things we've ever done and continue to do is the Young Ambassador Programme for the International MPS Symposiums that take place every 2 years. There we always choose 6 young people, they apply to be a young ambassador, and we take them. That photo was taken on our landing in Adelaide in Australia in 2010, but this last year we took them to the north of Brazil with the meeting there. And they have roles to do, they have responsibilities, they're treated as adults. If they need some additional care, we make sure we have volunteers that can discreetly give them this. But their disability is not a barrier to being an ambassador. They have interviewed some of the most important scientists and physicians in the world on their diseases, and then they have published it in our magazine, and they have fed back to funders at a lunch and learn. And this gives, this is all part of giving them confidence that they have a value and a role in life. We also encourage them to participate in focus groups to inform patient-reported outcomes. And for MPS 4A, there's a drug licensed in April last year, an enzyme replacement therapy, and the company had drawn up a questionnaire that they thought might give them some information in terms of patient-reported outcomes. We ourselves didn't feel that it was appropriate, but rather than saying no, playing mother and saying no, we actually then got the focus group together, a focus group of parents for the younger children, and the focus group of adults. And they did exactly what I thought they do. They ripped it apart, but they also gave the information and the knowledge and know-how for the company to put together something that we were proud to support. Support activities are important. Not everybody can get a treatment. Not everybody has an answer to their disease. And so the patient organisations must never get so hung up on one area of work, like research or clinical trials, that they alienate other members of the organisation for whom the drug hasn't come. It's a challenge that we face every day because we have 25 diseases in the MPS Society, and we have 6 diseases that are treatable. For the others, palliative care, and sadly in many, early death is all that they can look forward to. And so giving them opportunities to good memories it is important. So I want to say a little bit about funding research. We started out in 1982-83 raising money for research. It's what gave people hope. It's what gave the families who had no other hope a raison d'etre, really. And over that period, it's not a great deal, but we raised £5 million, and we funded some very baseline research that included, funnily enough, I was in France yesterday for a meeting on gene therapy, and someone had done a literature review on psychosocial behaviours in MPS, and the first 4 papers they produced were 4 papers from the researcher we supported 30 years ago. So that made me smile a little bit. It all looks a bit old hat, but they were actually quoting them. I think anything that can inform the clinicians, the ethics people, the researchers is really valuable. Probably our big break came in 1989, when we facilitated, as Krista said, the blood has been very important, but I was fortunate that in the days when we were encouraging blood taking, we were doing it at the Post House Hotel at Heathrow with Manchester and Cardiff, just bleeding the children and packing it up and taking it back to the lab with them. We did this also with Professor John Hopwood at Adelaide Williamson Children's Hospital, and in less than 18 months he found a complete deletion in 2 of our little boys there. Sadly, who lost their lives many years ago. And that led us to the first gene discovery, and now we know the genes for all our MPS diseases, which has also helped in progressing on to therapeutic treatments. Biomarker research has been around a while, but continues to be an important area of work. But it's important, if you support research, that you control your grants. that there's accountability, that it doesn't go into a pot that you don't know where your hard-earned money has gone to. Don't be afraid to make these researchers accountable, to have business meeting, to have a meeting, to not only to expect an annual report and not release the money until you have it, to make sure there's not double funding. It's, these are the things we've learned over the years, and they will respect this. They may be taken aback at first, but they will respect it. If they got their money from the MRC or the Wellcome Trust, believe me, they have to be accountable. In 2007, we managed to raise the funds to support the establishment of the MPS stem cell group, which works much wider than MPS now. But we appointed Brian Bigger. We were the sole funders, and it was a huge investment. We've probably invested more than £2.5 million in that group. But we've seen some remarkable work come out of it, and we knew it would help others as well. So you can be ambitious, and of course the group is self-perpetuating now. It's so well recognised worldwide that they get grants from industry and other establishments to do work. And one of our projects out of the MPS stem cell group was the animal work on a substrate inhibitor called genistin. It showed efficacy in mice, and after that, what do we do as a patient organisation? We funded this project, it showed efficacy in mice. Where do we go now? So in the end, we had no choice but parents were already buying this drug, giving it in different doses, spending a lot of money they could better use on their families and paying for food. So we carried on raising the funds on a proof of concept clinical trial, and that was launched in the autumn of last year. It's nearly fully recruited now, and it will is a proper placebo-controlled trial under MHRA conditions, and it will take 2 years. We've got it as a phase 3/4 because there had been some baseline work done on 3 patients in the United States, so safety data was accepted. And if we do nothing else, if it doesn't work, or doesn't work to the degree that is acceptable, then at least the families will have a choice about whether they spend their money on it. So there are all sorts of reasons for doing clinical trials. Now, I heard Krista's responses to the registry. I don't think they're very different from mine, but we had the foresight, more by luck than judgment, to start our MPS registry in 1983. I will not kid you, it is principally demographic, but with some key medical interventions that we felt over the years we've adapted to. For example, patients with MPS 3 tended to die from malnutrition, probably around the ages of 11 to 15, because we couldn't feed them because they had problems with their trachea. As the minute we started using gastrostomy, their life expectancy went up 10 years. That doesn't solve the problem, and they are very sick people. But it's allowed us to have some input into the information that people consider, companies consider, clinicians consider when looking at trials. So one of the good things about it is that it is more than 95% accurate for every patient in the United Kingdom. And that is really the key to this. Because of the engagement that I described earlier of the society, reaching out, not overloading patients, accepting what's right for them, we have been able to maintain that registry and to maintain the patient data. It's allowed us to provide evidence to horizon scanning. We're always looking to see how many patients and how much this drug's going to cost for the government. You get a call from horizon scanning, it's budgets. The regulatory body, so our data is recognised around the world. It's so basic, so don't be put off. but it's important. Even just mortality, over the last 3 years, we've been able to write in conjunction with a couple of clinicians a paper on the mortality of MPS 1, 2 and 4. This all goes into the, because it's published, it goes into the medical evidence. It's enabled us to be able to carry out quality of life measures. We do that for pharmaceutical companies, and it's enabled us to publish papers. And you will get calls from agencies that say, oh, we've been commissioned by a company, they won't tell you who it is, but I bet you probably know, and we're looking to do quality of life studies, or we want to talk to patients. Take some control. These agencies can only get their fees because you give them the information free. So, people know now that in principle we would rather work with the industry and have an unrestricted grant to carry out the work unhindered. So just a learning curve, really. So, as I said, the registry is really one of the greatest tools we have. It's seen as an authority. We're able also, when it comes to clinical trials, the industry and the clinicians will come to us, and we won't hand over personal data, but we will write or contact them, or go to a face-to-face meeting in the family, whatever is right for them, and take them through the request and give them the information, the patient information sheet, parent information sheet, so that they all have equitable access to trials. One of the things we've tried to rule out, and I think we've done it pretty well, is to avoid those that shout loudest getting on clinical trials. It's very important that patient organisations, make these trials as accessible as possible, so that the patients can all be screened, and then they're weeded out by virtue of the study criteria. And that, I think we feel that's very, very important. Out of this sort of database, until recently, until probably treatment came into play in the early 2000s, nobody in our organisation had a baby. You didn't live long enough, or you were too sick. So I'm very pleased to say that we are now doing a study on pregnancy in females. Anybody who has had a woman that's had a pregnancy and has an MPS disease. And we've done the literature review. We worked out who all the patients, or all the people, the women are. And we are just establishing a semi-structured interview, and we're looking at some pregnancy measures. And then we will carry that out, and we plan to present it at our conference in June, and we plan to publish it. And this is important because when you look at the literature review, all it is some patient example, individual case examples. But these are things we thought up that you can think up, and they come out of your knowledge of your disease, of your members. So access to clinical trials. Well, the first trial that we had for our organisation was Fabry disease back in 2000. And since then, we have been involved in about five others. And that we've tried to find a way to look after our members when they're on a clinical trial. So we've actually developed a clinical trial access programme that looks after the accommodation, the travel, the emotional support, the food, the allowances. In the early days of clinical trials for us, which was only 15 years ago, the families had no reimbursement because the hospital was so slow in reimbursing. The companies had to put the money in the bank for the trust years ago. But 3-4 months, and they've been up the motorway for every week, run out of money. So we have the clinical trial programme. It's a commercial initiative, so I'm going to cut short. We set up the subsidiary, MPS Commercial, and out of that we run this programme, and we look after clinical trial trials now, not just for MPS, but other lysosomal storage diseases across Europe and the United States for I think 6 companies. But don't forget, at the end of a clinical trial, patients want to get the drug. And patients that weren't on the drug, if it's shown and approved by the European Medicines Agency, want access to it as quickly as possible to bring them into an equitable situation with those that got on the trial. And you need to start, I can tell you absolutely, you need to start talking, in your case now, NHS England and the Specialised Commissioning Service. You need to start out at the start of the trial and making sure that you are high on the agenda, because even when you do that, it falls on deaf ears when the drug is approved. And anyone that's interested in looking at the levels we've had to go to try and persuade the government, as it's going to be now, not NHS England, they've made their decision not to provide interim funding for Vimizim for MPS 4A until they've really done the consultation. But you also have to have the courage of your convictions if you think something's wrong. And anyone here in this room who is affected by the suspension of the CPAC meetings and the specialised services decision-making, I put my hand up. We challenged it in November on the basis of the scorecard. But if you are an ultra-rare disease or even a rare disease, you would have scored with zilch for 3 questions. And unfortunately, that meant you would never have reached the prioritisation line on the piece of paper. And therefore, you would have been done. So, as a result of that, 3 days on the 27th of January, NHS England issued a new consultation. And I urge you all to read it and to act on it, to put rare diseases, ultra-rare diseases, at the top of the agenda. Because otherwise, however good you are at finding patients, getting them on clinical trials, there won't be any treatments